I'm Schmelke Diamond, and this is Sorry, Not Sorry. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sorry, Not Sorry. It's me, Schmelke. So today I will be myself. I have had some amazing guests in the last few weeks, and I have some amazing more coming up. Thank you all so much for the really kind feedback. It's Erev Yom Tif, and we are all kind of like rushing into a million places, but I didn't want a week to go by without doing an episode. Because I have a lot to say, but also because I think that it's really important that we keep this going, that we just keep sharing. So I want to kind of do an episode today about a topic that has been really hard for me, but I think for many of us. And when you kind of look at it from a broader perspective, it's actually a really good thing. And it's reimagining your dreams. Somebody once told me that not all dreams can happen. And I don't know if I agree with that. I still don't know because I'm still very, very much in the process of trying to dream my dreams and live them out. But, it kind of hit me when I was going a few weeks ago, right before Shabbos, to visit somebody up by Woodbury Junction, which is this really nice, really, really nice neighborhood in the outskirts of Monroe, in the outskirts of Kiryas Joel, right? And I would say that, from all of the developments, Woodbury Junction is the highest end. It's probably the most expensive. Somebody could find me an area that's a little bit more, but, as a general rule, and it was built by a secular development company. So, the whole thing was originally supposed to be a gated community, very hilly, very like Hudson Valley-ish. Just a very nice place in general to have a home. And my goal and my dream for very many years, especially after I got married, was to move up here and have a home there. And, I actually, let me take a step back. My real dream was to live in Kiryas Joel in the Statel, and everybody said to me, that's ridiculous. Why would you want to do that? You're never going to have that happen to you. And, just dream on. And okay, so find something a little more realistic. So here we have this nice upscale, little suburb of this big city of ours. And that was my dream. At one point, we were looking at homes to buy there. And then, life kind of took sort of a separate turn. Obviously, I got, what do you want to use the word sick, or do you want to say I started having some health issues, whatever it was. One of the big features of Woodbury Junction, as I mentioned, was the hill, right? The hills and the scenic views. And in order to live there and be successful at living there, you need to be able to walk up these huge, huge hills. Like just so that people can kind of put it into perspective. I was staying by somebody for Shabbos when, of course, it snowed, and my friend Laser has this really amazing house there, and he's really an amazing person. And he was like, well, the shul is right next door. And that's taka true. The shul was actually right next door to their house. The thing is that right next door was like down a very steep hill. So anyway, of course, what happened to me was that I had trouble walking. And that sort of, along with my rethinking my career in accounting, the brakes kind of just slammed. And as luck would have it, I wound up moving into an apartment that I had originally bought as an investment in Kiryas Joel. Ironically enough, in back of the house where I first lived when I first came up here, the family that kind of took me in originally, the Goldbergers. If you're listening to this, thank you. You guys are great. And so anyhow, back to 2 weeks ago, a week ago, whatever, I was in Woodbury Junction and I was like trying to park my car and get out of there. And for those of you who have been following a little bit, I started a new treatment called TMS, and it's really helping me regain my mobility, kind of wake the brain up. And for short distances, Baruch Hashem, I often don't need my cane anymore. Not that I'm embarrassed of it at all. In fact, I'm proud. I have, the coolest, nicest cane anyone has ever seen. Custom made from England, yes. Anyhow, but if I'm walking on my block where I live, I don't really need it. And if I'm a little bit wobbly, okay. But generally, my gait has gotten a lot better. But going to Woodbury Junction, there was absolutely no way that I was getting anywhere without a cane. Um, and as I was kind of driving and just parking your car, up and down these hills and here and there, I was thinking, like, my gosh, could you imagine if I would have moved here? Like, just look at how everything is kind of meant to be. You want to say bashert or whatever the term is. Um, I don't think anybody's listening to this who's not religious, but I guess if they were, a greater purpose, right? Um, so I was thinking, this was a really dumb idea. And as nice as it is to kind of drive by and visit and see my friends and appreciate the views because there are some really, really good views, it would have been an incredibly bad, not to mention incredibly expensive, idea for us to move to this place when, I wouldn't be able to enjoy it, right? And, you know, the thing that I love the most, the community of having neighbors around and being part of something, you actually don't have over there because like all suburban communities where the houses are set on larger lots and it's very hilly, everybody's very spread out. So, it's just kind of interesting how this was a goal of mine. And sorry if I kind of take a minute to organize my thoughts because this is not an easy one for me. I mean, you kind of have goalposts in your life, or maybe you guys don't. Maybe I just do. And I would love to hear your feedback on this. I would love to hear, how do you guys organize what you want? Do you have 5-year plans? I've always tried to have sort of like a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan, right? And for me, at this kind of, okay, married 6 years, so we're at the 5-year post, heading towards the 10-year post, having that big house with the yard, that was kind of like at the 5 to 10 year goal. But it didn't happen. And the truth is, right now, even though I am doing much better, Baruch Hashem, I don't think it would be a smart thing to kind of take that risk because at the end of the day, you never know. And you never know where your health journey is going to take you. I'm very lucky to have had this apartment that was on the ground floor where I didn't have to worry about stairs. Because if anybody has any issue walking, stairs are not your friend. They are just not. And having a condo association where when it snows, as it did a lot this winter, being in upstate, you've got somebody taking care of it. Just how things kind of work out. And I remember my Rosh Hashanah here, when I came Rosh Hashanah, I was davening in the shul, and the shul down the block from my house where I've gotten very, very involved. And I was davening in the shul down the block from my house. I've gotten very involved there. Very nice people, Baruch Hashem. And I had gotten very, very sick right before Yom Tif. A stomach bug. Actually, it wasn't a stomach bug. It was somebody had said something to me that was extremely upsetting. And I guess that, the stress from that got me sick. And, it was a very stressful time. It was still tax season. Um, I couldn't really walk very well at all, actually. And so instead of davening down in the big shul with the Satmar Rebbe, I was just davening on the shul down the block from my house. And there was this extremely kind of like touching, not touching, the word is just emotional moment when in the middle of davening, I just started crying, and I was just crying hysterically because I was thinking, how lucky am I to have dreamed a dream and had that dream come true? And it's really funny because the people in the shul are extremely from. I mean, there's like, you kind of think Satmar is as good as it gets, and then Kiryas Hill is as good as it gets. Well, this is like as good as it gets for Frimkeiten. Anybody who knows it, Verplet. Okay, so now that I've dropped a name, so these people are kind of like looking at me and I've just got the tears running down my face, and they're probably thinking like, oh my gosh, this guy's holy. Look at the way he's davening. And I'm kind of crying because, in the one hand, I was in an excruciating amount of physical pain. And on the other hand, I was like wildly grateful for this thing to have happened in my life and for this sort of this cushion to have helped break my fall. And how this original dream of getting to live in the state to live curious Joel, which for me is a privilege. I think that the media has sort of taken a really, really good and honestly fueled on by some of our former residents. And yeah, so that social media and some of the hate within and then hate without, that has sort of made a very negative view of KJ. And I look at it the opposite way. I think it's an extremely positive place to live. I think it's an extremely wonderful place to live. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the community having standards. I've said from the very get-go of this thing that I'm going to do this until A, I can't, or B, somebody in the community, like from the officials tells me that I'm not allowed to do this, that whether it be that the rabbi, the grand rabbi, has a problem with it, or whatever it is, when you are a chusid, and I'm not putting anybody who's not a chusid down. We have other episodes for that. I'm sorry, but I'm not putting anybody down. But part of our life is you say, okay, I'm a part of something bigger than myself, right? The Hasidic world has existed for almost 300 years. The Satmar dynasty has existed for, I don't know, you guys tell me, 150, late 1800s. So, I'm okay with the idea that, no, I actually don't have complete control over everything that I do here. And that's part of being in a community. And it's no different than joining a country club where there's house rules. And anyhow, I think that, and I think that a lot of people who leave here, and I mean leave, don't seem to understand this fact that wherever you go, any society, there's going to be rules, there's going to be standards, there's going to be a box to fit in. I happen to find it a fairly easy adjustment, Baruch Hashem, because I come from, and I've always said this and I'll always say it, I happen to come from an extremely narrow-minded, quote-unquote, in-the-box, boxy society. I'd imagine that somebody who didn't, somebody who grew up around more free thinkers or non-judgmental or whatever, like that would be harder. But for me, it wasn't. And I'm just honored to live here, and I'm honored, and I'm just so grateful, Kanai Nahara, for having this opportunity, right? And it's funny how it's devastating to think that one dream didn't come to fruition, and right now doesn't look like something that really can come to fruition. And it's not something that I particularly want, because my life has changed, my needs have changed. And when I say changed, it wasn't something that I volunteered for. Nobody asked me if I would like to deal with this neurological stuff, and I probably wouldn't have said yes back then. But here we are. And so that dream didn't really come to fruition, but yet at the same time, this other big dream of mine, the original dream, came to fruition, right? And so, there's ways you can look at it, and I guess one way is that, oh yeah, that sucks, I'm sorry. But on the other hand, it's like, well, wait a minute, isn't this what you wanted all along? And, if you're an Orthodox Jew, don't you believe that you really are put in a place for a reason, and that it really is the best thing for you? And I do. And I really, really do. Somebody once told me that, and he didn't think of it. He was quoting a rabbi who said it, and I'm probably going to butcher it, so apologies in advance. That when you ask for something, when you pray for something, right, God either says one of three things. The first one is, okay, you got it, right? That's kind of the thing that we all want. Like I said, somebody had this prayer, like, oh God, please just give me patience. Let me be, patience. I need to be patient and make it quick. Right? So first thing is yes. The second thing is not yet. And the third thing is, which a lot of people would just look at as no. The third thing is, I've actually got something so much better in store for you. And hearing no is an incredibly painful thing. I mean, I'm pivoting now into a new career, right? Aside from podcasting, world of public accounting, which I really do want to get into on here if I could get, the right guest to fill that spot, is something that I think it's amazing that, so many Heimische Yingelat, you have so many Hasidic people who have become professionals. So to all of those, haters who say, "Oh, the education system is," da, 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 da. Well, you have an entire institute, two institutions, Higher in Taro and Cope, that you know that just produce Heimish accountants, and they're good. They are really, really good. But it's just not something that I ever really wanted to do. So yeah, I'm looking to kind of go out of public accounting and into something else. At this point, it looks like wealth management, financial services, and going on interviews or sending your resume out and hearing no, it's devastating. And there are moments when all you want to do is just scream. I mean, losing my job was an incredibly devastating thing, not because I loved my job, but because I loved my company. And I was so loyal to them and they were so loyal to me. And when we had kind of squeezed all the juice out of that orange, which we had, and I think that we had all come to a point where it was like, okay, the company's evolved, AI has come in, my needs have evolved. Where do we go from here? That was just devastating, right? But at the same time, I really do believe that God has a better plan for me. You know, I'm not going to be one of these people who says that dreams don't come true, because I truly believe that they do. My life is incredibly messy, has been incredibly crazy, but has been a life filled with a lot of dreams, and a lot of dreams do come that have come true. Um, my father, who is going to come on the podcast, Ta, if you're listening, you're coming on. Come on, we're waiting for you here. Um, he ran four times to get elected, and he got there. He'll tell the story better than I ever could, but he won by a slim margin, but that was his dream, was to be a judge. And not only did it come true, but he wound up being one of the most esteemed judges, particularly in the personal injury and medical malpractice and guardianship spaces in the entire state. So talk about dreams not coming true, but he had so many other things that he had to go through before he got there. So the same thing with me. I'm wondering, like, does this mean that I give up by kind of walking away from a dream? Am I saying, okay, goodbye? Whether things with my health, right? Like looking, if I'd ever look at another apartment now, by not taking a place with stairs, am I saying that I'll never be able to use stairs again? Am I giving up on that? Obviously, I can use stairs, but as a hedge, like, am I saying this is never going to go away? No, I'm not. I'm not throwing in the towel, but I am saying that I'm just kind of reimagining my life to fit where I am right now. So, it's interesting because we're in a holiday season, and I know this sounds weird, but I feel like a lot of people always go through stuff around the holidays. I mean, I once heard a study that in the secular world, the 2 months of the year that people struggle the most with their mental health, or the highest depression, whatever, is November and December. Because in a way, you have the holiday season, and it's like, oh, everybody's supposed to be happy, and my life's a mess, and I can't be happy, right? And you have that added pressure, not only of what you're going through, but of having to, go around and have big events and, see everybody, see your whole family and put on a face. And we do have the holiday of Shavuos coming up in 2 days. Maybe when this comes out, it will have already taken place, or hopefully, day before. And It's tough. It's really tough going into a holiday when I was a booker and I didn't have any responsibilities. It was just like super fun. And now, it's like, well, life isn't so perfect, but we're all supposed to be happy and proud and all these things. And it's ironic because Shavuos was actually the very first Yom Tif that I observed or fully observed or tried to fully observe when I first, became religious way, way, way back when, in what absolutely feels like another lifetime, because in a way it was another lifetime. And I remember the shul, the Young Israel of New Hyde Park, where the shul nearest to our home, one of the big members of it walked up to me and they had like a little luncheon afterwards. Like, I guess in our Hasidus world, it would be the equivalent of a kiddush. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink of water. And they said to me, you're very brave for walking in here. And I was like, huh? And they were like, you're brave. This is a place that is foreign to you and it's a world that you don't know and you're coming and you're here alone and you're brave for doing it. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. But looking back on it, yeah, it was brave. Um, I had no idea what I was signing up for, but it took bravery. And at the same time, that was a dream of mine. I kind of knew from a very, very young age. And actually, one of my mother's closest friends, who has never been Orthodox, told her that she even saw when I was, 4 or 5 years old. I guess because her husband is Israeli, and Israelis don't, from what I've seen, don't have to be Orthodox in order to know Orthodoxy. Um, for us, that was something that was impossible. Either you were Orthodox or you just didn't know anything about it. And, she said that from the time I was like 5 or 6 years old, she could see whether it be their davening or, any religious event, I had a real love for it. And yes, that was a goal of mine. Um, I remember in high school, I had a little, like a lockbox, and that lockbox got thrown away. And I don't know who threw it away, by the way, in my family, if anyone's listening to this. Um, and I used to take this little newspaper called the Jewish Star and I would like rip out pieces and I'd put it in like ads for things or like news articles or things about being Orthodox, about being from, and I would stuff all of these little like shtickle of paper into this box. And the last time I opened the box, there was like nothing in it. So yeah, I'm a little mad that my time capsule is was thrown out. But my point is to say that was a dream that came true. That was a dream that really did come true, and Baruch Hashem for that. My life would have been probably a lot easier had I not chosen this path, but my life would have been meaningless. I mean, I can't imagine it. It's not even something that I, who am a creator, I'm somewhat of an artist. I am a writer. I'm a storyteller, but that's one story that I can't tell because the idea of me not having my faith, and being able to practice it in the way that I know, even being someone who doesn't learn enough, who doesn't do enough, who doesn't, who's just not. Maybe I feel like I'm not enough, but that would be such a dark place. It's the story would be one of complete emptiness and complete darkness and something that I would choose not to imagine. Um, and yet, when I was a young teenager flipping through that magazine, I never thought it was going to happen. I never thought that I was going to be from, and I certainly never thought that I was going to become Hasidic. And again, it was what was my dream? My dream was literally a cutout from a newspaper, an article or an ad or something that was put into a box that was on a shelf in my bookcase in my bedroom. And that's all it was. And okay, now I'm getting emotional. Um, I remember the first time that I had ever heard about the Satmar community was when, aside from going to the Woodbury Commons as a teenager and getting like really good discounts on, I guess, whatever it was then, I think it was Carolina Herrera or whatever. and seeing those Hasidim and being like, oh, those people are interesting, um, or whatever the media had portrayed them to be. But when a friend of mine had surgery right after high school, and the family was in the hospital for Shabbos, again, a family that had never been from for a day in their lives. But Shabbos came, and they were, kind of they were very into the religion. Um, and the rabbi, brought them this entire huge set, and they said it was from, this entire huge package of Shabbos food, and they said it was from the Satmar Hasidim, and it was like, well, they're anti-Israel, but they sent this really good food, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then, a few months later, I Googled it, or there happened to be a big news story then, and about a Satmar family, a tragedy that had happened. Uh, the Glaubers, Alav Shalom, who passed away, just horrible car accident. This is going back very many years, and I happened to meet one of them, very good people, and I remember looking at it and kind of Googling Hasidism and Satmar in particular, you know, the dynasty, reading the book and really connecting to what the Rebbe, Zechsleini Reb Yoel, said. Um, and again, it was just a dream. It was a Wikipedia page about Satmar. Looking at the picture of the big shield in Kiryas Yoel, which I drive by every day now, and actually, I don't even drive by it. I go on the shortcut because I don't want to get stuck in traffic. Um, and shame on me for not going and giving more hitches, because that's kind of a thing you do when you live here. You give hitches to people who stand by the shul. But, it was a picture. I never thought in a million years that it was going to happen. I also never thought that I was going to go through this, huge health trauma, um, lose the ability, as I said before, to walk, which again, Baruch Hashem, is really coming back, lose the ability to, remember certain things, also coming back, working really hard. Um, Listen, I met some really, really horrible people along the way. I mean, there are people who I've picked up on my journey, who are so dishonest and so, I, I guess the word that I would use is intellectually or pathologically stupid in terms of what they believe they are versus what they truly are. People whose values are completely backwards. People who, because they have certain power that they actually don't have, that they just decided to have mixed into other people's lives, and mine in particular, and caused a huge amount of damage. I mean, we're talking huge. And with the permission of certain people, I would like to get into that on here in another episode. Um, I can't go into it in more detail right now because I could get in a lot of trouble for it, you know. But anyway, I've met some really bad people. It's not all roses and smiles and hugs. But I've also met some incredible people. I mean, I have met some of the people who, like I just said, this Glauber, and my neighbors, and the shul, and everywhere I went, everywhere I've ever lived, I've been lucky to find people who I loved. I got married. There were 800 people who came to my wedding. Usually when an outsider gets married, they have an organization called the Tanzers, and I'm sure there's a million, and for those who don't know, in Yiddish, it means the dancers. And I'm sure there's a million spin-off organizations of this, where when somebody is not going to have a big crowd, but you want to make them feel like they're not alone, whether it be, an orphan or somebody from a broken home or whatever, often a Baal Shiva or a ger, they send in the tanzers. Well, by me, it was the opposite. By my wedding, the hall actually ran out of food and they had to order more, and I promise I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm saying, how lucky am I, right? Even with the bad people, in a way, it's kind of like an investment portfolio. You're going to have your stocks or whatever you invest in, right? Some of them are just going to tank. Some of them are going to suck, for lack of a better word. But you hope that the good ones outweigh the bad, and they really, really will. You know, um, and I've had dreams of whether it be friendships that didn't pan out, or living in the city. For me, living in Borough Park was something that I worked incredibly hard to do, to quote, blend in, and I think that I was successful in it. But the dream of being able to be happy there was something that could never come true. But again, I had to go through all of that pain, horrific pain, um, and pain that didn't necessarily have to happen in order for me to get where I am. And I know that I just said that, like, on the one hand, everything happens for a reason and all of that. And then I'm saying, well, this didn't have to happen. And no, and that's really hard. And I think I've heard also that, like, we'll never know until we get to the next world, the difference of how free will works. Like, we believe in the concept of free will in Judaism, but at the same time, everything is bashert, everything is preordained, and we'll never know that. I remember when I had stepped away from the reform movement, thankfully, and I had gone into conservative. I had gone to this place called the Little Neck Jewish Center. I think it's still there. And the rabbi there, conservative rabbi, for those who are not familiar, conservative is not Orthodox, not accepted by the Orthodox community, certainly not today. But I think it was a really well-meaning organization, a really well, definitely an intellectual organization, and a huge step, forward from where I had come from. And we were all talking about this one week at Shalshidis. We used to have these really, really nice Shalshidis discussions. And, because in that world, people wouldn't come to shul, right? Like, you weren't going to get a big crowd to come if there wasn't a bar mitzvah, and there was never a bar mitzvah, obviously, mincha marav time, right? And we were all sitting around talking about it, and the Rabbi Yafi, I remember, like, fate and destiny and all of that. And finally, we kind of reached the conclusion that it was a little bit like, and I've actually never seen this in the Jewish world, but when I was growing up, there were these kids' books where, like, it would be a story, and instead of it being a set ending, it was like, if you want them to do this, turn to page 200, and if you think this is what they should do, turn to page 400. And there is an ending, and again, like, we don't know. I'm so angry, and you're not supposed to be angry, actually, in Judaism, and you're not supposed to be angry anywhere. I mean, just even ask one of these yogis, some yoga guru, and they'll tell you that anger is a toxic emotion. And yet, I think, no, certain people didn't have to cause the pain that they did. You know, I mean, dishonesty, right? Dishonesty is something that is, there's almost no excuse for, right? But when dishonesty gets to a societal level, or it gets to a level where a person really doesn't understand that they're being dishonest, or a group of people don't understand how dishonest they are, there's almost nothing you can do for it about it. But again, it's narcissism, another thing you run into, and another thing that I kind of almost fell into as like a way to kind of save myself. Bad idea. Don't do that. Don't do that. People pleasing, also bad idea. So again, like, all these things that I'm bitter about, and then I'm saying, well, everything was meant to be, and I don't know. And I'm kind of talking this out with you guys. And if any of you have any ideas about this, or any like, any teaching that says kind of how to reconcile the two, please do send it my way. But I think a lot of us feel this way. I think a lot of us feel like it worked out for the best, and I wish that certain things hadn't happened. And I'm angry that certain things happened. I am angry that certain construction that I wanted to have done for the holiday on my home, because Baruch Hashem, I really do like my little bungalow in the hills of the Holy Shtetl, is not getting done. And I know how stupid that sounds to complain about, but, as anybody who's ever done construction knows, it's incredibly frustrating, and apparently it is, like, less reliable than the crypto market. Whatever it is, right? We get angry, and things don't work out exactly how we wanted. But my point is, it does work out. somehow or other, there's a bigger picture. And I think that Sorry Not Sorry is a space for me to express some of that anger, and some of that story and that rawness of, talking about wrong versus right and talking about how certain people, and obviously I'm not going to name names, in certain groups, maybe certain zip codes, um, are kind of, for lack of a better word, messed up. Certain behaviors are messed up. And you can be good and you can be a good person and a nice person who smiles and does this and that and really means well, but still be kind of, messed up in terms of, or backwards in terms of your values and in terms of, what you really believe versus how you actually live and what you act like you are. Um, but it's also a place here to express gratitude. So, I'm here to give encouragement to everybody that as dark as it gets and as dark as it seems that it'll get, there really is hope at the other end. Um, my wife, my parents, anybody in my family knows that I am, like, if complaining were a job category, I would be literally the partner of the biggest firm on Wall Street. Um, I can complain about anything at any time. But I think the reason I complain so much is because I really do see this world as a beautiful place, and it is a beautiful place. And all of us have the opportunity to do good. We can all do good. We can all do better. And I think that when things don't run the right way or when things don't happen, I guess I'll say the way they should, I'm just shocked. And I've never kind of learned to not be shocked and to not get upset by that. And the holiday Yom Tov is coming up, and it's kind of a moment again to realize that even though we all have some chaos in our lives, and some of us have less chaos, and I guess they're lucky, or maybe their lives are just really boring, and others of us have this like incredibly full plate, and then there's like stuff stacked to the top of the plate, like at a buffet, and then there's like another plate on top of that, and just like overflowing stuff, right? Um, but again, pause, and we're all part of something bigger than ourselves, and reflect on what our religion has given us through the Torah, right? And the crown of the Torah. My kid came home from Cheder today with a crown on his head, right? And again, I'm not a rabbi. I'm not here to act like one, but it really is a gift. And I'm gonna wish everybody a great Yom Tov, a happy Yom Tov. Um, sending just good wishes to everyone. And gratitude, again, I'll end this on the note of how lucky am I to have dreamt so many dreams and come from people who encouraged me to dream my dreams and seen them come true. And thank you. So, for the rant, sorry if I took up your time, but as always, sorry, not sorry.